I'm making this video because my wife and children have requested me to put on tape my experiences in World War II. Now, maybe just to give a little background of myself, I was born in Morse Run, Tioga County, Pennsylvania. I came to Braddock when I was 2 years old, and then spent my youth there, and in 1941 I was inducted into the service. I was only 21 years of age then. First, I went to Camp Lee, Virginia for induction, and then from there to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I was only to go into the service for 1 year. But in December, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and then it was said, you are in for the duration. Now I don't have any notes or anything, so I'm just taking this off the top of my head. Then from Fort Riley, Kansas, we were sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We spent another year down there training and going through different maneuvers. Now, I was in the 102nd Cavalry, which is a reconnaissance outfit. I was a radio operator in an armored car. Now, in 1942, we were sent over to England. Half of the outfit went to Africa and half went to England. I guess I was fortunate at the time that I went to England. Now, I spent 2 years in England. We did all kinds of maneuvers over there. We sort of even made parades, but we had a great time, even though it was all Army. We also had a lot of time to go out and see the different towns. We were all over England, and every place you went, you saw an American. We didn't know quite at the time that this was going to be a big build-up for the invasion of Normandy. So then on June, well, it was the last part of May of 1944, we were sent down to southern England to a staging area where there we didn't get any leaves. We were told that we were going to be prepared to go over to Normandy, and the invasion would be around June the 5th, 1944. We actually was briefed that we would land in Normandy, and we would be the first ones off because being reconnaissance, and we would be in land so far that first day. But then So I'm trying to think now. Then we got on the LSTs June 2nd. That was the day after my 24th birthday. We roamed around the channels, and as we were roaming around the different places, we could see boats and ships for miles. Then we were told we were going to, D-Day would be June 5th. But then a great storm developed, and we were on hold. So then the weatherman reported that June 6th would be clear, and Eisenhower said, "Let's go." So we were on our way, and at night, June the 5th at night, we could hear the airplanes roaring over us, and we were still on our way. And so early June, when daylight came, June the 6th, you could see for miles and miles. There was 155,000 troops and 50,000, no, I'm wrong, 5,000 5,000 boats and ships of all sorts. Then there was 12,000 airplanes that went over. Well, on June 6th, we start going in, and we could see land, and as we approached, the water was too high for landing, and then we were being fired upon, and the order was to go back out. So we went back out, and we anchored about a half a mile offshore. Now the other troops still went in, and just reports coming off. We were on Omaha Beach, by the way, and reports were coming back that they were having difficulty landing. The bunkers were not taken out as they were to be, and also the shores were supposed to be cleared by the bombings. Excuse me. But I guess because of the weather, it still threw them off course, the airplanes, and they were bombed inland further. So the beaches weren't cleared of landmines, and the bunkers were still occupied by the Germans. So as the regular troops were coming in, they were being fired upon. This is by reports, and this is what we later heard, that no sooner they started in, they were killed as fast as the gunners could fire at them. And then we were told, since we were also trained as infantry, we were to prepare to go off to help the others. So we were all prepared, but there was no signal to come off. So the second day, the first day, we just anchored out a half a mile offshore. Then on June 8th, that was 2 days later, we finally got the order that we were going to land. And so we came in, and were able to get up onto shore. The landing crafts come right up onto the shore. Now we had armored cars, small tanks, and we also had a lot of jeeps, and we had armor, we had lots of ammunition and so forth, ammunition carriers. So we started out, and as we approached the shore, there was so frightening. We were frightened before, but this was so frightening that there was bodies all over the beach. So we headed in, and as we got onto the shore, then they were taking the bodies and putting them in trucks. And we were able to they had a road that was very steep going up off the shore. So we got up off the shore and got up to a higher ground, and we were told to go into a field and camouflage all the cars and all the equipment we had. But we weren't in there too long that we got the order, we have to move out, and because they needed reconnaissance. So we started to move out, and as we went onto the roads were just littered with bodies. Also, the animals, lots of animals, because this was farm country there too, were killed. And we were going into a town called Signy, and there we were to secure that town by outposting the different areas, so that if the Germans started a counterattack, we would be able to report back. But the American army was moving fast, and we didn't stay there too long, so we started to move on, and we kept on the route towards St. Lo. And naturally, there was a lot of reconnaissance here and there that we had to go out. Now I was in Troop D. Like in the cavalry, there's troops, but these are all armored, no horses. And they used to send out, like Troop C would go out first, and maybe Troop E or Troop A, whatever. But when they came back, sometimes there was several of them had been killed. Now when we went out, well, naturally we saw the enemy and then reported back. And we were very fortunate. You're supposed to go up to find out where the enemy is located and not do any kind of encounter with them. And then try to find out how many are there and report back. Now we investigated every farmhouse, everything on the way as we went. Sometimes we had to go out into the fields, and the armored cars were very lumbering and couldn't make up any speed or anything, so we tried to get back out onto the roads, stay on the roads. Well, this went on for quite a while, and then we got the report that we have to fill in as infantry. There was gaps in the lines, in the American lines, that we should fill in. So we had to leave our cars behind and filled in. Now, I don't know, but I was always fortunate that I wasn't in the main front line, but was coming up, not quite to the rear, but as the front line got up there, there was quite a few shots being made and a lot of action, and so we held back for a while, and then we got the order to keep moving on, and I don't know how many miles we went in, and then we were ordered to come back to our car. In that encounter, a very good friend of mine was killed. But then we come back and we started our reconnaissance again, and we went on. To St. Lo. And when we got to St. Lo, or we were outside of St. Lo, they were having a hard time taking that at first. But they kept pushing the Germans on and on. And at one evening, we were waiting to get the order to move on, and we were behind big hedgerows. This is one of the big things that everybody was frightened of, was hedgerows. That in time they found a way to get through with big prongs on the big tanks to push them over. Because no sooner you went through an opening of the hedgerows, you were fired upon. And a lot of the men were killed during this time. But so we were behind the hedgerows, and it was dark, but we heard a lot of action in front of us, which was the Germans maneuvering around, maybe getting ready to move out. You could even hear them hollering their commands in German. And finally, they said we have to move on. There was a breakthrough, and we have to get the reconnaissance to go forward. And actually, before we got into St. Lo, it was taken, and so then we had a reconnaissance off to the side roads of different sorts. Then we kept continuing on, and we ended up, there's a lot of stories in between, but they're not necessary to tell now. But we continued on, and we were to go, the main army stopped, and just before Paris, we were on the other side of the Seine River. Then they told us that they were going to let the Free French take over Paris. That was de Gaulle and his army of French, the underground. So as we were going to approach Paris, they sent out reconnaissance. So we were told by the French that a certain way was clear and that we could go up to a certain point. So our troop went out, and we had, in our troop, we had 3 armored cars and 4 jeeps. So we started up the road, and we stayed on the road And we passed a lot of farmhouses and everything because they said everything was clear up to a certain point. So then we kept going, and I don't know how far we got before we were approaching a certain area there, which seemed like there was a large wall. It wasn't a hedgerow, it seemed like a big wall. And the first Jeep and armored car went around, the road took us around this big wall. And I happened to be, again, was very fortunate because we always took turns in being the point or at different times. And I happened to be in the last armored car. As we approached this, the other cars disappeared, like behind the wall, because that's where the road went. And all of a sudden, as the other armored car was just going around, we kept our distance a good bit. There was fire and big balls of smoke came up. Naturally, right away we thought, there goes our armored car, first armored car. And this wasn't to where the Germans were supposed to be. And then the other armored car, it got hit too. And I don't know what happened to the Jeeps at the time. There was always 3 men in a Jeep. And as we went around, we didn't go around. The car commander says, get behind the wall, don't go around. And we got behind there, but it was too high for our guns to get over, or for us to even see over it, even standing on the armored car. So we stayed there, and everything happened all of a sudden. And the car commander says, we got to get out of here. Well, as we were behind the wall, here comes some of the men that weren't wounded or hurt in any way, running around the wall, that were in the first Jeeps or whatever. We didn't know how bad the armored cars were hit, but it must have been pretty bad when they went up into black smoke. So the car commander decided, everybody that's there, we happen to have one Jeep behind us too, to get on, as many can get on the Jeep and also on top of the armored car. And we're going to go down through the field under cover of this wall. We got to get out of there. So we started down, and we went several miles on the field. It was more or less parallel with the road there. And car commander says, we're not getting anywhere, we have to get out onto the road. So I don't know where the Jeep went, but we went out onto the road, and we're going down the road trying to go as fast as possible, but then all of a sudden there was fire from both sides of the road, and the men up on top were saying they were hit and screaming, and then all of a sudden the armored car was hit. And the way I felt, I gasped and thought that it went right through my stomach. And the car naturally went off the road into a ditch. And I still had my wits about me. And the driver and I opened the flaps and fell out in the front. We slid down the car like and fell onto our faces. And we laid there, and I thought, well, I'm dying. I wonder what they'll think at home. So I don't know how long I laid there, but someone rolled me over onto my back. And as I looked up, there was two Germans with rifles in hand pointing it at me. So I closed my eyes because I'm sure they're going to kill me. But to my amaze, they were pulling me. Each one dragged me got under my arm and pulled me. And as they were pulling me, I could see my leg bouncing up and down, and my pants was all smoldering. And I went, they dragged me into a barn that was close by. And I just laid there, and I must have passed out or what, I don't know, that I can remember. And then I was awakened by someone ripping off my clothes. They had a knife and was ripping off my clothes. And I looked up, and it was a German, and it might have been a medic, because he started to wrap my leg. And he threw the clothes, after he was through, he threw the clothes on top of me and left me lay. And then I don't know how long I laid there, and I couldn't understand why I didn't die, because that felt like that went through my stomach. I couldn't move, I couldn't touch anything, so I didn't know. So then, again, I don't know how long I laid there, how long I was out. I felt somebody lifting me up onto, well, I saw a door. They lifted me up onto a door and carried me out to the road and left me lay alongside the road. The only thing I can think of that these were not the main German soldier, that they might have been from occupied countries. But again, I didn't know. And now I'm sure if they were SS troops or anything like that, but the SS troops wouldn't be left behind like that. They would have killed me. But they left me alongside the road. And then again, I don't know how long I laid there. And I was wakened again, and I looked up, and here that was American soldiers. I don't know how I felt. And one thing, maybe I was in shock, or this is what they probably told me later, that I was in shock, and that's why I didn't feel too much pain at the time. Well, the medics, I guess they were, took me back to our lines, and it was a first aid station. And I could hear someone say, "He's lost a lot of blood." Now, I don't know if they gave me intravenous there or what they did, but then I found myself in the field hospital, and I was in a bed in a tent, and a nurse came over, and I said, "Could I have some water?" And then I asked her what happened to me. She says, "Well, they just brought you here." And I said, "But I'm all bandaged up from even my head there, and my arms, my legs." And she says, "Well, did a small operation on you, but not much of anything. We were going to send you to evacuation hospital. So I found myself again under a big tent on the floor with, naturally it was a stretcher, laying with a lot of men are all around me. Lots of moaning and groaning and screaming. And I think that was the first time I started feeling some pain. And I said, when somebody came around, I don't know how they could take care of everybody, but when somebody came around, I asked if I could have something because I was in real bad pain. She says, well, you'll be taken care of. Again, I must have just went in and out, in and out. I felt myself being taken and put onto a plane. We were, excuse me, we were put onto a plane like in racks. And then somebody gave me a shot. And from there, I didn't know when we started off or when we landed, but I woke up in a hospital in England. And here, when I woke up, I was on an operating table. And they were, somebody was, I don't know, doctors or who they were, but they were picking a lot of, they said it was little pieces of shrapnel. It looked like somebody threw a lot of stuff at my chest. So they were picking all that out. And they said that they were going to put a cast on me for the time being. And again, I don't know what all they did there. Again, I found myself in a bed. And I woke up and I felt like I was on fire. And I know I was hollering, somebody help me, I'm burning up. So they came, and I don't know what they did again to me, but I don't know how long, how many days or what. I laid there, and I woke up this one time again, and I was still real hot, and I felt something at the very top of my leg. Put the covers down, and I put my hand down there, was able to move somewhat then, and here I picked up that looked like maggots. I hollered again, and somebody came, and I says, my leg's rotten. And I says, because it looks like maggots. And they says, well, don't worry about it. There's an explanation for it. So they said they're going to take me down to the operating room, and they're going to fix my leg so they can put me in traction. So from there, they didn't put me to sleep, but I went into the operating room, and the doctor said the maggots were to eat the dead flesh. They took off the cast, and they said that they put the maggots in there to eat the dead flesh. They won't eat the good flesh. They'll only eat the dead. So then he said, we're going to prepare you for traction, we're going to put a pin through your heel. It won't hurt. We'll drill through there and put this pin in, and then from there they'll put you back in bed and put you up in traction. So I heard the drill going, but I must have passed out because the next time I woke up I was in bed. So I laid in bed for quite a while, and I don't know how many days have passed or anything. So they said, well, we're going to take you down out of traction for a short while, and we want you to lay flat in bed. So we did that, and they said, we're going to try to take off some dead flesh. And I says, you can't do that, you got to put me to sleep. And they says, well, it'll be all right. And they says, we'll do the best we can not to hurt you. I says, I'm in pain enough, I don't need this. And anyway, I held on to the bed for dear life, and they started doing it, and I couldn't stand it. Tears run down my eyes, and holding on. And they says, all right, okay, we'll take you to the operating room. So then they took me to the operating room, and I guess they cleaned it all off. And they said they were getting prepared then to try to do a skin graft. Well, all this was happening, and I don't know, again, how many days or anything have passed. And I said, before they took me in for skin graft, I said, did anybody at all notify my parents what had happened? They said, oh, sure. They would have probably got a telegram or something, what has happened. So I was taken in then and had this skin graft and put back in traction then. And I don't think they looked at the skin graft for a few days. And then finally they took the bandages off and they said, oh, it took pretty good except for one spot. Well, the one spot was where the compound fracture was, and that was the reason why I was up in traction, to get the bone back in place. Then there was a lot of things happened in between and everything, but it was just a matter of waiting. Now I went in this, when I was wounded, it was August the 25th, and that's the same day that Paris fell. So I missed that chance of going into Paris. But I stayed in the hospitals in England from that time until a few days before Christmas, December. Then they said everything looks pretty good except for that great big spot. Well, during that time too, I mentioned that they were going to try to fill that in, and they did a small skin graft and it didn't take. So they did a little, what they call pinch graft on my stomach, took little pieces of flesh from my stomach, or skin I should say, and put on there, and that didn't take. So they said they were going to send me back home and send me as close as possible to my hometown. Well, I thought, well, they're going to send me up into Butler, to the hospital up there. And so I don't know the exact date, but they put me on the ship to go home. The ship was the Queen Mary. And all I can remember, the Queen Mary is being taken on, carried on by a stretcher, taken up to a room, and was in this room with on bunk beds with several other, maybe there was about 4 or 5 in that room, maybe 4. And I was feeling pretty good, but I couldn't get up. I wasn't allowed up. I'd stay in bed. And some of the guys that were in and out, we asked them how things look out there, and they would give us reports of, oh, it's nice weather, because you could hardly feel yourself moving. Once in a while you could feel a sway or something on the boat, but then it took us 4 days, I think it was, on the Queen Mary. We got good meals and everything, and I was feeling pretty good to eat. I love to eat. But anyway, we were taken off then. It was the day before Christmas, if I recall. And we were taken to Haglund General Hospital in New York. And we were treated real well there. The Red Cross, the Salvation Army were giving us all kinds of food and little toothbrushes and toothpaste, shaving cream, whatever we needed, they were giving us it. And they said, well, we're going to give everybody one call to their family. And I said, oh, gee, this is going to be great, because all this time they're probably wondering what is happening to me. So I got that call, and was really a time of excitement. My mother did tell me that she received a telegram saying that I was wounded. She says that her heart, when she saw the men come to the door, she said her heart sank. But it said I was wounded. But then she got a second telegram, and that felt worse, because she didn't know what my wounds were. Then they said I was critically wounded. Well, so then I told her on the phone what had happened, and that I was being taken care of real well. And they were going to ship me out close to home, but I didn't know where. So when I get there, I'll see if I could call, or if I can send you a note or something where I am. Well, lo and behold, they sent me to Rome, Georgia. And they said that was a good plastic center, and also orthopedic. Well, went down there, and we were in barrack, but it was real nice rooms set up, and they tried to again do something for that opening, but here actually I had osteomyelitis in there, a bone infection, and I needed more flesh on that section, and then the skin graft. Well, before I get started on what they were going to do. My mother and my sister came down, Gladys, and Norman Shelby, Gladys's son, came down to see me, and they stayed for a few days. Then they then told me that I was going to have a graft where they were going to take flesh and skin from my stomach. Well, they would take it and make like a handle on my stomach, they said. I mean, this was all going to be. And then when that would heal, they would cut one end and attach it to my wrist. And then when that was attached and it was still good, they would detach the other part from my stomach and put it down to my leg. And then when that grew onto my leg, they would detach it from my wrist, because you could imagine the position that had been in, and then they would open it up, the handle like, and spread it out over my leg. Well, that's what they told me they were going to do. But then came down that they weren't going to do that. They thought that was a little bit too much and it might not have take, or it was just a chance. So I got to the point where they decided I better get up and start walking. And they just put big, heavy bandages on my leg because it was still seeping from the place that they couldn't put the skin graft over. Then, anyway, the story goes on and on. They finally said, well, we're going to send you home for a while. So the Red Cross got in contact with the family and said I would be coming home at a certain time. And so I went home on crutches, and I was met in Pittsburgh. I went by train from Rome, Georgia up. They didn't send me by plane. So then I stayed home for a while, and well, they were giving me, I guess 2 or 3 weeks, I can't quite remember. And we decided we'll go down and see Gladys in Harrisburg. And Ina and my mother, we went down to Gladys's, and we're going to stay there overnight. But during the night, I got real sick, and then it felt like my right leg was really giving me a lot of pain. So they called a doctor, and the doctor says he can't touch me. You have to go through the regular service at Indiantown Gap. So they called the Army services there, and they said they'd send an ambulance out for me. So then I went to Indiantown Gap. Here I had an infection on my leg. It was running from my groin down. And so I stayed there 6 weeks. I thought, gee, I was going to stay a few days to get that. And I said, well, now's the time to send me close to home. I said, no, you have to go back to Rome, Georgia. So went back to Rome, Georgia, and they tried some more maneuvers on there and skin grafts, and they couldn't do it. Nothing would take, and so they said, "We're going to send you up to." I lost it now. Up to Pennsylvania. Oh boy. Not Indian Down Gap, no. Gee, it might come to me. It is very simple, but Valley Forge, that's where they sent me. They said it's a good plastic center. So I stayed at Valley Forge, and they're still trying, and they're wondering what they could do. And they said it finally got to the point, they says, that I'll just have to go home and maybe it will heal over, but go into the hospital ever so often in Pittsburgh. So I was discharged then, and that was in February of 1947. So you can imagine all the time that I spent in the hospitals from 1944 to 1947. So that's practically, I figured it out, 2.5 years in a way, in and out of hospitals. Now that's not quite the end. And then when I was discharged, I naturally went in to the hospitals in there, and they would scrape the bone, and they would say, we'll still have to figure out something here. And so the leg just kept draining, and finally I had to do something to start, whether I was going to get some work someplace. So I went to one of the Army personnel and talked to them about it, and they says, you'll have to get a sitting down job, a sedentary job. And they said maybe you could try drafting or something like that. And I said, okay. I said, but I just didn't like drafting, but I applied for a course up at Conley Trade School in Pittsburgh, and I ended up then staying there for just about a year or so. But in the meantime, I might mention that that's how I found Lara. We met at the church for some meeting together, Irwin Church and our church, and then she said she was going to Robert Morris and I was going to Conley, so we rode together on the train. The first thing is blossomed into a lot of going together, and so anyway, that's how we ended up getting married and had 4 great children. But time went on, and my leg still wasn't healing. So after all this time, they finally found some procedure in 1984. They took a muscle from my side, transplanted it to my leg, and then skin graft that. And that's what has happened. And my leg is in very good condition. It worked out. If it didn't, I don't think I'd have had a leg today, but it worked out. And that's all to my faith in the Lord.